This is the 2021 Cadillac Escalade, and it's a big deal, and not just in a human-scale dwarfing sense. I'm Chris Davis from Gear. I sound funny, but you get used to it. And the reason this is a special SUV is it's the first to feature GM's enhanced Super Cruise. It's the latest version of the hands-free driver assistance system. Now, this isn't a self-driving car, this is not autonomous, but at the moment, in terms of being broadly available, it's about as close as you can get. First, a little Super Cruise history lesson. It launched first back in 2017 on the Cadillac CT6, its luxury large sedan. And at the time, Super Cruise could basically do two things. It could maintain your speed in relation to the traffic in front of you, and it could hold you right in the center of the lane. What set it apart from other similar systems was that you didn't have to have your hand on the steering wheel while it did that. Whereas other systems rely on either contact or more usually some degree of torque on the wheel, you have to move it one way or the other to remind it that you're still there and poised to take control should the system be overwhelmed. Super Cruise uses a driver attention monitoring system based on a camera. Now that's built into the steering column here. It watches my face and it makes sure that I'm paying sufficient attention to the road around me. To make sure it could stay in the center of the lane, GM sent out a LiDAR-equipped mapping car which would map down to precise details the lanes of highways and freeways in North America, distribute those maps via OnStar to the Cadillac CT6, and it would then combine that with a high-resolution GPS sensor so that each car didn't have to have LiDAR, but it could benefit from the extra data those sensors produce. Super Cruise has always had three problems, I've thought. The first was availability. It was only available on that one car, the Cadillac CT6. And whilst Super Cruise was probably the best feature of the CT6, generally it couldn't quite compete with the rivals from Mercedes and BMW. The second was more general availability. It was limited to which roads GM had mapped. Now, so that it knows exactly where it is in the lane, GM has equipped it with these high-definition maps. Outside of those maps, though, you can't use Super Cruise at all. Now, it's getting better. At the last count, there's over 200,000 miles of divided highways in the US and Canada, and GM is adding to that all the time. But because of those maps, it means that you need a subscription too. You get 3 years of Super Cruise access when you first buy the vehicle, but after that you'll need to pay for an OnStar subscription because it uses OnStar to deliver the new data to the vehicle periodically. Now, the third problem was the absence of a feature that other cars were offering, and that's automatic lane changing. Super Cruise could keep you in one lane, but if you wanted to change lanes, you needed to do that yourself. You had to grab hold of the wheel, Super Cruise would disengage, you indicate, you change lanes, you wait for the lights to come back on the light bar to show that Super Cruise has picked up its position in the middle of the lane again, and then it would take over and you could let go. Now, enhanced Super Cruise adds auto lane change, so it can do that for you. Basically, it taps new software and new sensors, predominantly at the back of the car, to have a much better perspective of the lanes either side of you and what's coming up behind. Now, it's a fairly conscientious driver. Super Cruise isn't going to weave in and out of every gap that a human driver might take advantage of, but that's by design. GM built it to be fairly human-like in how it performs, but it won't take many risks, and that means that it's suitable more for highway cruising rather than trying to beat the rush hour. GM, though, has designed it to be fairly human-like in how it performs. For instance, if you're moving from a slower lane to a faster lane, Super Cruise might accelerate slightly above the speed you've set it before it changes lane, so as to better match the speed of the faster-moving traffic. Meanwhile, if you indicate and someone's coming up at high speed behind you, even if there's a gap Super Cruise could in theory safely move into, it might wait to let that fast-moving traffic go by. Now, GM has the hands-free highway speed driver assistance market pretty much to itself at the moment, but that's going to change quite soon. Ford's bringing out active drive assist on the new F-150 and the Mustang Mach-E electric crossover, and that will do pretty much the same thing, allow you to take your hands off the wheel while it maintains speed on certain mapped highways. Auto lane change is really easy to use. You just indicate for the lane that you'd like to go into. You have a graphic saying it's looking for an opening on the screen. Eventually, when it finds that opening, it will automatically change lanes for you. You'll get a message to tell you that the lane change is complete, and then you turn off the indicator. It's not always going to be able to do that, though. If the system decides there's an insufficient gap, for instance, you'll get a message after a while saying that it just couldn't complete the maneuver. It's not just automatic lane changes either. The new system also changes how it behaves within the lane when you're dealing with other traffic around you. In particular, if there's a large truck or lorry to one side, Super Cruise might do a human-style shift over in the lane so as to give you a little bit more space, just because it knows that that's what human passengers like. Now the driver attention side works as it did before. There's a camera mounted here on the steering column, and that watches my face to make sure I'm looking at the road around me, checking my mirrors, making sure that the car is safe. There's a light bar built into the steering wheel, and that changes colour depending on what Super Cruise is doing. If I'm in the middle of a lane and it's active and I don't need to touch the steering wheel, it lights up green. As before, if I stop paying attention, if I look away, the system will flash first the light bar in the steering wheel to remind me that I need to be looking at the road, and after a while it will disable Super Cruise and even bring the Escalade to a stop, and then contact via OnStar the emergency services to see if I've had a heart attack or if I'm just taking a nap. Now the other big challenge Super Cruise has faced has been availability. Until now it's only been available on just the one car, and that's going to change this year with it arriving on the Escalade and a couple of other Cadillac sedans. But the big news is that GM plans to roll out Super Cruise across basically all of the brands under its umbrella. That means you'll be able to buy Chevrolets with Super Cruise and GMC and Buick, and that's going to make a huge difference because I think a lot of people just don't know that the technology exists at the moment. The other issue is price. The Escalade is not an inexpensive SUV, though it's a very nice one, and as you might expect, Super Cruise costs a little bit more on top. You're looking at $2,500 for the Super Cruise package, but you also need some extras to make it work, in which case it comes to just over $6,000. Now GM hasn't said how much it expects to charge for Super Cruise when it launches on its other brands, but it's hard to imagine the price delta being that much different on, say, a Chevrolet or a Buick. Super Cruise isn't perfect, even in enhanced form. For a start, you still have to tell the system when you want to change lanes. You can't just rely on it to spot a gap in traffic as your lane slows down and automatically move across. That's by design though. GM wants to make sure that the driver, who is still responsible, is still in charge. Super Cruise is not autonomous driving, and GM is very clear about that. It's a level 2 system. I'm still, as the human driver, responsible for making sure that what's going on around me is safe and that the car is able to handle all of the conditions that it's facing. It's not a level 4 or 5 system where I could get into the back seat with it turned on and just start reading a book or taking a nap. Now I know your big question. Is this version of Super Cruise better or worse than Tesla's autopilot? And it's a question with no easy answer. Now, autopilot is a great system, and it gets better very, very quickly. In the space of time it's taken GM to add Super Cruise to more than one vehicle, Tesla's pushed out numerous updates to autopilot. In fact, sometimes it seems like every week Tesla owners are waking up to find their car has added on new features and functionality overnight. For all the improvements though, autopilot is still a level 2 system. The driver is still responsible for what it does and where it does it. And it's still a hands-on system. You're not supposed to take your hands off the wheel for extended periods of time, and if you do, autopilot will complain about it. So the decision of Super Cruise versus autopilot may very well come down to where you want to put your hands. Do you want to have the faster updates of autopilot but need to keep your hands on the steering wheel? Or do you want the slightly slower progression of technology that Super Cruise has seen, but that ability to be able to sit back, fold your arms and watch as the car does the steering for you? True autonomous vehicles, level 4 or level 5, where you just get in, tell them your destination and a robot drives you from A to B, that's still a long way out. What we get for the moment though is a taste of what that future might feel like in the shape of systems like Super Cruise. It really does make a difference not having to constantly be nudging or touching the wheel, just to remind the system that you're there and present and watching the road. Now I don't think I would buy an Escalade just for Super Cruise, though it's a very nice SUV. At the same time though, I don't think I would buy an Escalade without Super Cruise, and I'd go further than that. I'd say as GM starts rolling the technology out across its portfolio, I wouldn't buy a car without Super Cruise where there was an option for it with. It's really that good. The driver assistance wars aren't going to end anytime soon. There are a lot of systems out there, each with their own fans and their own critics. By adding auto lane change though, GM has maybe addressed Super Cruise's biggest criticism. That, combined with the fact that you'll be able to buy it on more cars, will mean that it'll be an even more obvious choice when you're next shopping for your highway co-pilot.